What is up, guys, and welcome to Week 11 Power Rankings for the ASL. I am joined today with Hutch,
What's up, guys?
and I'm, of course, Excellent Man. So let's just jump right into the picks. At number 14, we both have the Master and the Denver Nummels, and he is seeming to be on track to get the worst record of all time, the worst record possible, in fact. He still is yet to pick up a win, and in fairness, he was extremely close this week. It was a very close 1-0 where he just got reversed by a laddie ass. He could have played it a little bit better. Reflect Height definitely seemed to catch him off guard, but he did have outs at that point and he didn't seem to explore them. It was probably one of the better games that he has played all season up until that point, though, so he could pick up a win or two in the next 2 weeks, but as it is, it's just pretty rough to see an 0-11 record.
Yeah, I honestly think the Master could have won his last game. I feel like he was throwing away Mons when he didn't really need to, and it came back to bite him. But I don't see him going winless. I see him getting a win at least in week 13, so he's got that for him there. But yeah, he's played really well. He's just his end game has been the one thing that's really held him back. His middle game and beginning of the game hasn't been terrible. His team is pretty good. Well, it's not fantastic, but it's decent. It gets the job done. It's just his end game has not been what he's wanted.
Yeah, for sure. Number 13, we have Cam Waylord, who is once again lost his week. He's definitely been on a huge decline since the beginning of the season, which is obviously, like I've said every week, disappointing to see. I'm not really sure what we can truly attribute it to. I think he might just be not putting in as much effort as he was before. It's hard to say, really. He's just hasn't been playing up to scratch, is really what it boils down to. His prep is like fine. It's not anything spectacular, but it should, in theory, get the job done. He just doesn't seem to be able to get the job done. It's just his opponent seems to be the better player in every single match that he's played since like week 4.
Yeah, it just always feels like Cam is never he never has momentum in a game. He's kind of just playing into his opponent's hand, and I think that happened again this week. I mean, at some point you gotta just say, my season's over anyways. Maybe if I make this play, I'll lose the game anyways. But whatever, let's just try it and see what happens. Um, his team is okay. It's not horrible, but he's definitely not playing as well as he would have hoped. Um, his first 4 weeks, he came out at 2-2, already beating his record from last season. So I mean, he's had improvement, which is nice to see. But yeah, he's just not been good towards this end of the season, and he's got to learn how to capture momentum and keep it because that's been a big struggle for him throughout the duration of the season. So hopefully he can correct that and be a playoff team next season.
Yeah, and speaking of playoff teams, we have Shadow, who up until like 3 weeks ago was one of the top contenders for playoffs, and he really dropped off in the past few weeks. He lost like 3 games in a row, maybe 4. So he's definitely had a rough go of it recently. I think he kind of lost momentum. He was putting his all into a lot of the games and then just couldn't keep it up throughout the season, which once again, a bit disappointing to see. He had a phenomenal season, a very big improvement from what he had last season, but at this point he's lost all momentum and it's looking pretty rough for his future. I'm not sure if he's going to be able to pick up any more wins at this point, which is a bit disappointing to see, but he had a very good season so far, regardless of his previous shaky performance.
Yeah, like you said a couple weeks back, Shadow was in the thick of the playoff race. He was sitting right about 500, and he lost some games. Those games also happened to be big differential losses. Like this week, he lost 5-0 to TJ. So those games hurt you, and we're seeing as the playoff pictures unfolding that differential really kills you, and he's eliminated based on his record. So you got to keep it consistent. If you're trying to be a 500 team throughout the entire season, you cannot drop the ball at all. You have to stay consistent, and that's just not the case. Shadow is at 4-4 after week 8, and sitting here after week 11, he is 4-7, and he's shown some signs of being a fantastic coach, and I don't think he's quite there yet, but he definitely shows some potential for the future. And improvement is always an amazing thing, and I think even improving is better than making the playoffs. So good on you, Shadow. hope to see you in the playoffs next season.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. At number 11, though, I have Milan and you have Susie. Pretty big difference of opinion here. So why don't you talk about Susie first?
All right, so I got Susie down here, and I could put Milan down here, but I figured let's put Susie down here because I'm gonna base this on how they've been playing recently. Now, Susie does have the better record, but his differential is horrible. It is negative 14, and he's almost a 500 team. That is insane. It just goes to show that in the games Susie has lost, he has lost them big time. So, also, 4 of his 5 wins are against teams with non-winning records, and Milan is actually, despite having come into the league as a backup or as a replacement, he's pulled out more impressive wins than Susie has. And Milan is playing with a team that he didn't draft, and I've seen them both play excluded from this season, and I think Milan is the better battler. So I'm going to go ahead and put Susie down here. And Susie's just been really inconsistent lately. He started off 5-2, now he's 5-6. So he started off really well, but just as of late, he has not been playing well, which is why I got to put him lower.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I will say that I feel like Milan has been playing a bit below what his expected standards would be, and obviously I understand he did draft his own team, but he definitely has been playing better than Susie in recent weeks. He did pick up a win to kind of break his loss streak. It was only up against Cam, so it wasn't like a huge win for him necessarily, but it is a sign of the shifting tides there for sure. So I could see him moving up again some more. He's probably my favorite to win the consolation bracket or at least make finals. Even though there's a lot of really strong contenders that will be knocked down to the consolation bracket, Milan definitely has what it takes there. However, his record just doesn't show that. So I am basing it a little bit more off record. The seeding definitely will be important because if Milan has to fight one of the top playoff contending coaches round one of consolation, that would definitely be rough for him. However, as he's been playing recently, I don't see that happening still. But yeah, at number 10, you have Milan, so you can lead that off.
All right, so yeah, I have Milan down here. Starting off or not starting off the 4-7 team. Shadow's 4-7, but I have Milan down here at the number 10 spot because I feel like Malone can take more pride in his season. I mean, Milan is just kind of coming in, and we say it all the time. He's just kind of coming in, filling in. I'll take your spot over. I'll do what I can with the team, have fun with it, and then get a spot for next season. But Malone is he's honestly played pretty well throughout the season, despite his record. He's played really well, picking up some nice wins. So I got to put Milan lower, although Milan has had some impressive games and will continue to have impressive games. And like I said in playoff implications, I think there's a very good chance that Milan will win the consolation bracket.
Yeah, for sure. I have Malone at this point. He did pick up a pretty big loss this week, which obviously hurt his differential in seeding for the consolation bracket. But before this, he was on a pretty hot streak. He had like a few wins under his belt, and he was like definitely making a run for playoffs. It was definitely a typical Malone season, where he just kind of levels up. He gets his team a little bit more some way halfway through the season, and yeah, he definitely made a very good run. A lot of strong playing from him that unfortunately we didn't see in this most recent game, which is why I do have to put him a little bit lower. Obviously, also his record is lower than all of the coaches above him. He is currently the top seed, I believe, that is eliminated from playoffs. Everyone above him does have a shot at playoffs still, technically speaking. So that is a reason why I decided to put him at this spot rather than any higher.
Fair enough. So yeah, I have Malone here at the number 9 spot. Like I was talking about, how I was saying that Malone can honestly take more away from this season. Yeah, he's played really well. He's got some nice victories. He's beat like TCP. He beat Brad when Brad was still a coach. Um, he beat Cam and he beat Shadow, I think were his wins. No, he didn't beat Cam. He beat Shadow and then he beat Demaster, I think. So those are his wins. So definitely some good things to take away from it there. And yeah, Malone, like you said, a typical Malone season where he doesn't start out the best, but towards the middle of the season when it counts the most, he really starts picking up wins, and then it's just that one game that really knocks him out of playoffs. This week was a big game to knock him out of playoffs. Ian, pretty sure 5-0'd him. So that was big, but I'm still gonna put him at the head of the pack of the 4-7 teams, just because I feel like he's had the best season out of all of them.
Yeah, for sure. And at number 9, I have Susie, and his recent playing doesn't really justify it at all. I agree with you on that. He got 6-0'd this week, and honestly, that wasn't even his first 6-0 of the season. He got 6-0'd by, I believe, Cody before.
Andy was 6-0'd by TJ. He's been 6-0'd 3 times.
TJ, yeah. So he's been 6-0'd a lot, and that's why his differential is so garbage. He's had a rough go of it. He hasn't beaten any of the top teams except for TCP. So realistically, he probably won't make playoffs just because his remaining schedule is also very difficult. He's played all of the lower level teams already, so he doesn't have any comfortable wins, and his differential is just so low. He's practically eliminated from playoffs, but he is still in playoffs. He has picked up 5 wins this season, which is better than any of the coaches below him. And I'm not sure if any of the coaches below him will eventually beat him out. It's tough to say, really. But I will say that Susie's play recently has definitely not been up to scratch for a playoff contending team at all. He is definitely by far the lowest tier, and if I wasn't so set on the actual records, I definitely would have agreed with you and put him lower. But I did want to put him a little bit high just because he does have more wins, and those wins are over, for the most part, the teams that he is above. But yeah, coming in at number 8, we both have Keister. So you can lead that discussion off.
Yeah, so I got Keister down here at the number 8. Of course, we have 3, 5, and 6 teams. But Keister has had also a pretty typical Keister season. He's a little bit behind the mark of where he normally is. He normally sits at about the 7 seed until like the last couple of weeks of playoffs. And he took a pretty big loss this week, I'm pretty sure. He lost like 4-0 or 5-0 or something like that. Definitely not what he wanted out of that. Or it was like a 3-0. I don't actually know. 4-0. So, yeah. Keister has a real shot at making playoffs. He's got to win some big games coming up. I think he plays Shadow and Malone, so there's definitely some chances to pick up a lot of differential there. If he's able to beat up on some of the teams that aren't in the playoffs anyways, so they might not be trying. So there's definitely some hope for Keister. It's just you got to put him over all the 4-7 teams just because of differential, or just because of record, and you got to put him over Susie just because of how he's been playing lately. And I think he like 4-0'd Susie as well, so that's the thing. But yeah.
I agree. I understand Keister's definitely playing better than Susie. Still very quiet, very modest season that he's had so far. This game was kind of a must-win game for him. He's still obviously in the race, but he definitely did realistically need to knock TCP down to closer to his level if he really wanted to make it, because TCP is obviously that most vulnerable position, most vulnerable seed. He does have a very good chance of picking up 2 more wins in the next coming weeks, which will be good for him. But unfortunately, of course, in getting those 2 wins, he's not guaranteeing that his rivals in AZ and TCP are getting 2 more losses. So, he doesn't really have complete control over whether he makes playoffs right now. The teams above him do. And also, obviously, he does have a 5-6 record, while AZ has a 6-5 record. So that's obviously going to bump him down below that as well. His playoff chances are still definitely much better than Susie's, but still looking very grim at this point. But yeah, we'll just jump into number 7, where we have AZ, who took a very close game with the Master, a lot closer than I'm sure he would have liked. The differential gap is very crucial between him and TCP, because at this point, even if he beats TCP, he might still lose out based on differential, depending on how TCP plays against me in week 12. He still has a very good shot at it. It's honestly a toss-up between him and TCP. That week 13 game will be the deciding game, I'm pretty sure, because I think that differential is close enough that it'll probably be bridged But yeah, it's tough to say whether he will make it. I'm leaning towards TCP at this point, but I don't have that set in stone at all. It could very much be AZ. We'll just have to see.
Yeah, so AZ had a pretty good week for himself because Susie lost and Keister lost, which just gives him so much space. That one game is so helpful because he doesn't have to worry about, oh, do I have to 5-0 this person so I can get ahead of in the differential race. Like you said, it was a close game against Demaster and a game that I honestly think he should have lost if Demaster preserved enough Mons, which he should have. He has a shot at winning the game, but yeah, AZ, it's going to be a toss-up between him and TCP because I'm pretty sure TCP loses this next week because he's going to play against you. And that Week 13 match is going to be insanely hyped up. It's basically going to decide the rest of the playoff picture because pretty much 1 through 5 is pretty much secured. That's pretty much guaranteed, pretty much locked up. And it's just about that 6th spot, and AZ is in a prime position to get it. Obviously, he's going to have to win in the next week to really help himself out. If he can win next week, that's going to be his best odds of making it. And he plays Susie, a team that's been struggling recently. And then just got to win that game against TCP, and he will be in. Obviously, TCP can do vice versa to him, so definitely be hyped out for that match, and we'll see how it turns out.
Yeah, for sure. Coming in at number 6, we do have TCP, obviously, who will likely, after week 12, if I can be a little bit cocky for a second here, will likely end up having a tied record with AZ. So like we've been saying, that game, week 13, is going to be ever so crucial for deciding who makes it in. Hopefully we can get a tied differential as well to just make it even more high. But TCP does have a pretty good differential lead, so he could theoretically just beat him out in differential, force AZ to like 4-0 to make it into playoffs, which would be a bit rough. So TCP definitely in the most vulnerable position of all of the current playoff teams, just because his differential is pretty big jump below everyone else's. He has like +5, I think, while all the other coaches have +13 or higher. So yeah, he's definitely the most vulnerable by far. But that being said, all the way up until 3 technically isn't clinched yet. They're pretty much as good as clinched, like you said. But if they do lose out, then theoretically any one of them could drop for AZ to come up while TCP stays in playoffs. Not the most likely situation. I think TCP is definitely the most vulnerable, which is why he is still down here at 6.
Yeah, it's between the playoff teams. It is very undisputed that TCP is sitting at the 6th spot because basically 1 through 5 they have a huge differential lead on TCP. TCP is sitting at 7 and 4 with a +5, or no, a +1. No, it's a +5. It's +5. So he's sitting at there with a +5. The second lowest differential is Ian at 7 and 4 with a +13. That is an enormous gap, and there's really no reason to put TCP any lower because he's sitting in a playoff spot, and it's a toss-up between AZ, but you can go with a record tiebreaker. And it's the fact that he has the hardest schedule going here on out. Out of the playoff teams. Yeah, it's gonna be very telling how good of a coach TCP is if he's able to stick into this playoff race, because he'll show how good he is under pressure, because TCP has to be at least scared coming into these next couple of weeks, because there's that tiebreaker match in week 13 that's going to really decide it all.
Yeah, if AZ loses to Susie, of course, that's just all up in the wind, and he's pretty much secured it just because of the differential gap. But he definitely should be scared regardless. I think AZ will beat Susie. I think Susie does have the matchup, but just because of how he's been playing recently, it's not really going to be like necessarily in his favor just because of having matchup. But yeah, regardless, we'll jump into number 5, Ian, and like we've been saying in the past few weeks, he's definitely in his season. His team is just so strong, and it really fits him very well. It's the kind of team that he has the most success with, and you've been seeing that. He's got a very strong differential, very strong record. He's been getting some pretty high differential wins over the lower coaches. This week he 5-0'd Malone. So that definitely helped a lot to secure his spot above TCP. Just make sure that he keeps that differential gap as huge as possible to ensure that even if he does get upset and loses some games in the coming weeks, he still has that big differential cushion to make sure he still makes it in. That being said, I think there's a very solid chance that he clinches very soon anyway. I don't think the differential will even have to come into play just because of how he's been playing and how he's been prepping during this season.
Yeah, Ian has made a slow but surely surge of differential. Like a couple weeks ago, he was sitting at like a +1 or something, and now he's sitting up here with a +13. He is getting big wins. He's really keeping himself above TCP pretty greatly. Making sure he has that distance so he's not at distance for people to overtake him. The only teams that can overtake him are Keister and AZ, but Ian would have to lose like 5-0 and 6-0 for Keister to overtake him. And then there's the obvious shot that AZ can overtake him, but very unlikely. Ian doesn't have the most difficult schedule to end out the season. I'm pretty sure he plays one of the lower teams, then he plays TJ.
Yeah, he plays
think.
TJ.
So that would be the end of the season for him. He's been playing really well. I mean, he finally knows the team that really works for him. So just draft Mega Scizor, Garchomp, Tapu Fini, and then fill in the rest. Basically, every season you will have success.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely seems to be like that. So we'll just jump into number 4, where you have a little bit of a difference of opinion. I have TJ here, and you have yourself. You can lead off with yourself, I guess.
All right, so again, with me and TJ, it's a very close differential race. He's at +19, I'm at +16. That's pretty much the only reason that I have myself lower. And due to the fact that, TJ beat me. I only won 3-0 this week. TJ won 5-0. I beat arguably a more difficult opponent based on record, but still a 5-0 is different than a 3-0, and he's more set up to get that higher seed. It's really a toss-up between the two of us. We've had extremely similar seasons, and yeah, there's not too much to differentiate between the two. I definitely have the easier schedule to end out the season, so there's more opportunity for TJ to drop the ball and fall to a lower seed, but I feel like just TJ's had a stronger season. He's got the +19 differential, which is better than my +16.
Yeah, TJ's definitely been a very strong gatekeeper. He's gotten really big wins over a lot of the coaches who are below this margin, and also some pretty strong wins against a lot of solid coaches such as yourself. But I feel like overall his win spread is less impressive than yours. He hasn't really beaten all of the top tier coaches quite as much. He lost to both Cody and myself, but you did beat Gran, who took over Cody. So that was obviously going to be a fairly big factor in taking over. And also, the other big thing is obviously the remaining strength of schedule. It shows that you've played stronger coaches overall. If you have an easier last 2 weeks, you play Demaster and Susie, whereas he plays Milan and Ian. So he could definitely pick up a loss to either of those coaches and then drop his seed fairly substantially at this point, just because you'll likely win out, but his win out is far less guaranteed, which is the major reason, other than obviously higher quality wins, that I decided to place you at 3rd and him at 4.
Fair enough.
So we'll just jump into number 2, where we both have Gran, who picked up a loss this week against you, which brings him to a 9-2 record, which is tied with myself at this point. He does have a slight differential lead at this point, though. He's got +30, while I have +25. But with that being said, obviously, Gran took over the coach, and he has not been keeping up with Cody's set expectations. undefeated record is obviously going to be difficult to keep that up, and he has lost to two of the top coaches for sure. So it's not really going to be any big hit to him at all, especially considering he's locked for playoffs. So I don't think he's taking these following games anywhere near as seriously. So yeah, it's not a big deal, but I think he's got a 4-2 record after taking over right now.
2-2.
So it's 2-2.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know where the extra two came from, honestly, but yeah, 2-2 record isn't anything phenomenal. And while the two losses were against two of the highest coaches, both this season and historically, obviously not going to be any kind of big knock. He's still going to keep in this buy range, which is like not clinched, but pretty much guaranteed that he'll keep the buy just because of his high differential. Even if he loses out, I don't think anyone's really going to take him over. And also, I highly doubt he'll lose out. He's definitely a very solid coach. Just not the strongest performance necessarily compared to myself is gonna keep him at the number 2 spot.
Yeah, it's hard to knock him for those losses because he lost to both of us, which historically have been tough wins to come by. But yeah, you can't fault Grant too much. Like I said, I mean he came over at 7-0, pretty gifted, but the records in differentials don't show it. But I think there's a huge rift here. If I was able to dictate the standings, then I would say that you get the number 1 seed, just because of how you play, but that's not how that works. Of course, if Gran loses at some point over these next 2 weeks, you will have the chance to choose what seed you want based on how you play your upcoming games. So we'll see how that works out. You can pretty much choose who you want to play in the first round of the playoffs, or the second round, because you'll get a first round bye. But yeah,
Yeah,
Gran has had a pretty good season, bar the 2 losses. Like, he didn't lose to bad teams, no. He lost to playoff teams, and he won the games that he was expected to win. So that's really all you can expect from him. And he did beat AZ, which is a potential playoff team. So, yeah, Gran has had a pretty good intro season, and I'm really looking forward to see how he drafts next season and how he plays, getting to play the entire season.
yeah, and also just see how he does in the playoffs, honestly. But yeah, like you said, the seeding is kind of a little bit iffy just because having a coach that took over a 7-0 team is going to mess up the seeding unless they can keep to that standard. And yeah, so currently I would say, honestly, for the coaches below them, not that they have much room to manipulate their seeding, they're probably going to be looking more towards the 4th and 5th seeds than the 3rd and 6th seeds, just how that kind of works. Obviously, that's just how it works when the 1st and 2nd seeds are flipped, even though not technically flipped, but you know what I mean. But yeah, coming in at number 1, have myself, naturally, had a very strong season. Not as strong as last season, but it does look like I'll probably finish 11-2 or 10-3. I don't see myself dropping below that at all. And yeah, it will definitely depend on what seed I want. I can bridge this differential gap even if Brown doesn't lose. I just need to pick up some pretty big wins. So it depends on how that goes. But just how my performance has been this season, I definitely have had a very good streak recently, a 6-win streak, very solid. So yeah, there's not really a lot of reason that you could argue to put me below the 1st seed.
Yeah.
So does that wrap it up then, I guess?
Yep.
All right, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching our Week 11 Power Rankings. Make sure to stay tuned for the coming weeks. There definitely is a lot of room to move. I know there wasn't a lot of moving this week, but a lot of big games happening next week. So you should stay tuned for both weekly recap, playoff implications, and obviously Power Rankings. So yeah, see you guys next week.
See you guys.